Board. Okay, welcome everyone to Pesach preparation TJJ style. The first part one of 3 events going to happen in the next 2 weeks. This Sunday, next Sunday, and the Sunday after are the last Sundays before we start Pesach, April 8th at night, which is Wednesday night. So before the holiday comes and sneaks up on us, we have a halacha that 1 month before any holiday, you're supposed to already begin to learn the halachos and get yourself prepared to make sure you have the most meaningful and impactful chag of all time. So here at TJJ, our TJJ board, our mentors, who are the best and the brightest that the TJJ community has to offer, went out and did some of their research to get you prepared in the next 3-week series to get you prepared in every way, shape, or form for your Pesach Seder. The way that the format's going to work is that each person is going to touch on a specific topic and teach you the how-tos, the halachas, and some ideas behind it so that you can get prepared. If you have questions on a particular topic to make sure that we cover all grounds, what I'm going to ask you to do is please write your question in the comment box over here. We're not going to be answering questions here on this call, but we are recording it for people who want it, but we will address your questions after. So with that, we'd like to start off this evening with the very beginning, the very, very first step of it all, talking about getting ready, chametz and kashrus with Amit Dayan. Oops. And I will unmute you somehow. Aren't I a good host? I know how to unmute people. Weekly host. Unmute. Try it now.
Okay.
Got it.
So, hi guys, my name is Amit Dayan, and today I'm going to speak about Passover and keeping chametz. So, during Passover, we're not allowed to eat, drink, or own any chametz, which is food that is made from grain and water that is rice. There are 5 different types of grains that are forbidden, which are barley, oats, rye, spelt, or wheat. To avoid coming in contact with chametz, people clean their homes and living spaces. Objects that cannot be cleaned, they're actually sold to non-Jewish people, and then when we're done with Passover, we buy them back. Um, uh, we celebrate Passover as like to remember that our release from like slavery in Egypt after Hashem has brought on the 10 plagues on Egyptian who refused to let the Jewish nation out of Egypt and slavery. There were basically matzah, which what we eat in Passover is when we didn't have time to make bread before we left Egypt. We basically had like 18 minutes to prepare to leave. And that was basically matzah. And yeah. So, yes, Sami?
All right, thank you, Amit Ush. So that is in preparation beforehand to make sure that there is no chametz in a person's house whatsoever. Moving on to the next segment, the very first segment is Badikas Chametz. And to present Badikas Chametz, I would like to turn the mic to Dina Aflalo.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I would like to start off with saying thank you for those who kept Shabbat this week, and for those who tried to keep Shabbat, and for those who reached out to people to keep Shabbat. You're all so incredible, and I know right now is a really hard time, but I'm really so proud of our TJJ community for coming together and being so strong. Okay, so let's start with what is Bedikat Chametz, which translates to the search for Chametz. Now, this takes place the night before Pesach begins. We finally take the final search before the Chag begins to ensure that there's no more chametz in our homes. Chametz is any food that is made of grain and water that has been allowed to rise. Traditionally, 10 pieces of chametz is wrapped into paper that can be burned and then placed all around the house. So all in like corners and crevices like that. And typically more than one person will help you look for the chametz. Now before the search, we say a blessing. Blessed are you, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with his commandments and commanded us to remove the chametz. And after the search is completed, we recite any chametz of leavened bread which is in my possession, which I have not seen, have not removed, and do not know about, should be annulled and become ownerless like the dust of the earth. Now I want to explain that you really should go through a thoroughly deep cleaning before you say this, because some halacha is we should wash our hands before we place the bread around without making a bracha. Each piece should be no larger than an olive, and hard chametz cannot be used since it will leave crumbs. So stale bread cannot be used. Chazal states we must search with candlelight rather than moonlight and daylight, because we won't be able to see in the cracks and crevices. So that's why we do it at nighttime rather than during the day. We may not use a candle with more than one wick. So for an example, like a Hadalah candle would not be allowed. A flashlight may be permitted. Some Pesukim feel it is better because we would not be afraid to check in the cracks and crevices. One may start with a candle and then switch over to a flashlight. The minchag custom is to use a wooden spoon to remove crumbs of chametz. And we use wood because when we burn the chametz, we should use wood to burn it. Chametz should be burned until it is charcoal. And after the burning, we recite kol chamir with a slight change. You may crumble up the bread and then throw it into the wind or sea as a substitute to burning. Now, the whole purpose of searching is to ensure that the whole home is clean of chametz. And a very interesting idea is that chametz is the same letter as chet, which means sin. Now, you aren't just searching for chametz, you're searching for impurity within yourself. Before the Chag comes, you must do a cheshbon nefesh, which is essentially checking yourself and getting rid of your own personal chametz.
Thank you, Dina. So yes, after you do Bedikas Chametz, which is Tuesday night this year, Tuesday night, the April 7th, after you collect that chametz, the next following morning, you're going to go into something we call biur chametz. And to present that, I'd like to give the mic back to Amit Dayan.
Okay, so on the morning before Passover, we burn all the chametz that was found during the search and anything that was left over from the breakfast or the day before. We say a prayer when we burn the chametz, which states that any chametz that is still left in our possession by mistake is no longer considered ours and will be considered as the dust of the earth.
Okay, thank you, Amit Tush. So after the burning of the chametz is the last and final thing in terms of the preparation to get started for Pesach itself. So just before we go into the rituals of what we actually do when Pesach begins, I would like to turn the mic over to Tamar to teach us what it means when we say it is the time of freedom, Zman Cherusenu, to get ourselves in the right mental state before we begin the actual holiday. And with that.
Okay, hey guys, so Pesach is known as Zman Cherusenu, which means the time of our freedom. During the Seder, the sages tell us that we're supposed to view ourselves as if we're being freed from Egypt right then and there. We know that we were physically freed from Paro and the slavery he was putting us through, but what does that mean in a spiritual sense? How are we freed spiritually? The root of the word Mitzrayim, Egypt, is Tsar, which means constraints. Rabbi Dessler explains this incredible idea about how just as Mitzrayim constrained us physically, our Yetzer Hara, or our evil inclination, constrains us spiritually. Whatever your Yetzer Hara might be, laziness, speaking Lashon Hara, which is like speaking bad about someone else, or any other type of spiritual illness, it's now the time to free yourself from it. These next 2 weeks leading up to Pesach, let's focus on Zman Cherusenu. Work to free yourselves from the Yetzer Hara. Pesach happened during Zman Cherusenu. It wasn't that Pesach happened and then because of that it's Zman Cherusenu. It's Zman Cherusenu there, and then Pesach happened, because it was the time of freedom, and then we were freed from Egypt. So now it's the same thing. It's Mancher Seinu now. So now is the time to free ourselves from the Yetzer Hara. Let's keep in mind that, sometimes it's hard for us to realize our potential and how much we can truly grow. But if we were to realize how much power we have to change, we'd be at such a high level. On Pesach, we're the kings and queens so that we can remind ourselves of the power we have to free ourselves from the Yetzer Hara. So since we're the kings and queens, when we eat the matzah and when we drink the 4 cups of wine, we lean to the left because that's what kings do, and that's what noble people do. And we also don't pour ourselves the cups of wine because a king would never pour himself a cup of wine. So let's just keep in mind now that we're the kings and queens going into Pesach, and it's Mancher Seinu, and it's time to, like what Dina said also, it's a cheshbon and nefesh, to account for your soul and to really just get ready for Pesach and free our Yetzer Hara, free ourselves from the Yetzer Hara.
Thank you, Tamar, for that. So when the mindset is correct that it is the Zman Cherosenu and that we are holding in the right place, and the holiday begins, again, April 8th, Wednesday night. Once we start, we go to shul. Something very interesting happens, something in the davening, Pesach night, that is unique, that never happens any other time ever before. And to teach you about that, I would like to turn the spotlight to Daniela Mercer.
Praise for Hashem. And you say it during all of the holidays or on any day that you're not allowed to work or there was a really big miracle. So you say it on Hanukkah, you say it on Sukkot, like all of the different holidays. Basically, usually when you say it, it's said during the day. But on Pesach, it's said after Ma'ariv at night. And so that's something that only happens during Pesach. So the question is, why do we say it at night during Pesach? And there's several different reasons. So one is you say this prayer as well during the Seder. But when you say it during the Seder, it's split into 2 pieces. And typically you're supposed to make a bracha on this prayer. And since it's split into 2 pieces at the Seder, you can't. So one reason that you say it after Ma'ariv and Shul is so that you can make that bracha on it then, before you go into Seder. Also, a reason that you say it during Shul is this prayer is, it's talking about all of the miracles that Hashem has performed for us, the Jewish people. And so it's really like you're singing and you're praising him and you're thanking him, because it's really like we're so blessed as a people. And so it's a lot more powerful when you sing it in shul with the whole community and everyone around you. And then one other reason that we do it at night versus during the day is because of the Korban Pesach. So basically, before Pesach, there's a sacrificial lamb. And you slaughter the lamb the evening before Pesach to eat that night. And generally, it's a sacrifice, and it's a way of saying thank you to God. And when you do it, you also say Hallel, because that's also a big thank you to God. And so that's what makes it really special on Pesach, and the fact that you do it at night. But the important thing to remember when you are singing it is just how lucky we are. Pesach is it's a holiday of like a big miracle, the Red Sea and our exodus from Egypt and the 10 plagues and everything that happened. It's like huge, massive miracles that happened for the Jewish people to free us. And so that's really what this prayer is about, and it's what we have to keep in mind when we're singing it.
Thank you, Daniela. And just to add as well, even if you don't go to shul, it's still appropriate to say Hallel. It's the only time we say it at night. So that's what we're going to do at shul. Moving along is right when we get home from shul. You notice the highlight of almost the entire holiday focuses around the concept of the Seder. So to talk to us a little bit about the Seder, I'd like to turn the spotlight to Nicole.
Hi. Okay. So I have two topics and they're back to back. So this is gonna be like a little long, but I'll make it fast. Um, so I have the Seder and the Seder plate. So I'm gonna begin with the Seder. During Pesach, we have a Seder, which means an order to our traditions. And it begins with a feast that includes drinking wine, reading, telling stories, singing, and of course, eating all the special foods. The point of having a Seder and what we're trying to accomplish is that every person should remember and feel what our ancestors felt when they were going out of Egypt. It's important for us to know that when we sit down and have a Seder, it is because it's a commandment in the Torah to be able to sit, go over, and remind ourselves the story of how God took us out of Egypt. The significance of why God took us out of Egypt and why Judaism is so obsessed with it is because we went from being a nation that no one cared about and being tortured to the most important nation in the world, and we became ambassadors of God. It's also important because Hashem proved to the world that he's the ruler of everything, and the Jews are his people and we are his children. So now I'm gonna say like the halachos. So the steps in the Pesach Seder, we first begin by doing kiddush, then we wash our hands, then comes karpaz, where we dip a vegetable into salt water. And when we dip the vegetable into salt water, it's to remind us the tears shed by our ancestors enslaved. There are going to be 3 matzot stacked on the Seder table. We will now break the middle matzah in half. The larger piece is going to be hidden. The smaller piece is going to be returned to its place with other 2 matzot. Then the 5th step is we now get to the Passover story. And basically during this time, the children ask the 4 questions, which is like, why do we only eat matzah? Why do we eat bitter herbs? Why do we dip our food? And why do we recline on this night? Then after those questions are asked by the children, the next step is rachza, yeah, I don't know, where we wash our hands and we wash our hands again and recite the blessing over the matzah. So instead of the bread, it's the matzah. The next step is a sandwich that is made with both matzah and bitter herbs. Then the festive meal is eaten. And then the Seder is concluded with a prayer that God accepts our Seder service favorably. And the takeaway from the Pesach Seder is for us to understand. Give me 1 second. Sorry. So the takeaway of the Pesach Seder is for us to understand more why there is an order during this holiday and why we do the things we do. And then now for the Seder plate. So we already spoke about how during Pesach we have a Seder, and Seder means order. So as most of us already know, during this holiday we eat a lot of interesting and special foods. What you must know right off the bat is that every food that we're gonna be putting into our mouths during the Seder has a significance. Like we don't just put the food without like, oh, I decided to eat like something better just because it's fun. Everything has significance. So there are 6 items on the Seder plate. These items include the karpaz, which is the vegetable, which it symbolizes the tears of our ancestors dipped in the salt water, like as I said before. The maror, which is the bitter herbs, and it symbolizes the bitterness of slavery in Egypt. Then we have the bitter vegetable, the chazeret, but the bitter vegetable, which also symbolizes the bitterness of slavery during our time in Egypt. Then we also have the mix of apple, nuts, and spices, and wine, and it symbolizes bricks to show how hard like the work of a slave is. Then we have the shank bone, which symbolizes the lamb sacrifice in the holy temple in the ancient times, like Daniela said, like the lamb. Then we have, and last we have the hard-boiled egg, which is symbolizing the festival of offerings brought to the holy temple. So like, aside from these 6 items on the Seder plates, we obviously have the 3 pieces of matzah, which the top it represents Kohen, the middle represents Levi, and the bottom one represents Israel. So we have that also. And then for the like halachos of the Seder, I have a picture. So I'm gonna like quickly explain to you guys so you guys know. I just have to flip the camera. Okay. So I found this picture on the internet. But basically, we have the hard-boiled egg. We have the karpaz, which is the vegetable. I'm gonna talk about the maror like after, because this one's like it has a story behind it. Then we have the bitter vegetable, and then the mix of like nuts, spices, wine, and then we have the shank bone. So for the maror, Avi actually helped me. Like he gave me like a little Devar Torah, and I like wrote it, but it's very like fast. And because the maror has like, okay, I'll explain it. So, so some people think that it's weird that the maror, which is the bitter herbs, it's in the middle of the Seder plate, because when you look at a Seder plate, you would think, oh, like we should put something sweet in the middle, you know? But no, instead we put something bitter in the middle, which is the maror. And the maror actually symbolizes like the hardest thing that we went through, which is slavery in Egypt. And the maror stands for death, which is and we should put something happy and sweet in the middle instead of death. But the reason why it's in the middle is because time is limited and we must keep growing. Like we can't like give up and, you know, like stop. And death is actually what gives beauty to life. So the maror is in the middle to remind us that death makes our time meaningful, and, you know, don't take anything for granted. That's it. Okay, I'm nervous. Avi, please take over.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for going through. She definitely learned a lot. I want to say again, if you have any questions specifically about any of the steps from before or anything up till now, please write it in the chat and we'll definitely address it. We have two more things to get to tonight before we end tonight's session. So that was the overview of the Seder, of the structure of the night, and the Seder plate that's going to be set up in front of us. We're now going to jump into the Seder itself with the very first step, which is Kaddish. And with that, I'd like to turn the mic over to Jason Firestein.
Hi. Hi, everyone. So I'm talking about Kaddish today. Kaddish. Kaddish is the first part of the whole Pesach meal. It is the part where we say Kiddush. So Kiddush is where we make a prayer on the wine. When else do we make a prayer on the wine? We actually say it every week on Shabbat when we have Kiddush and Lechem. Why do we make the prayer? Why do we make a blessing on wine? Is to sanctify the meal, to make the meal holy, Kadesh, to make it holy. So right when we get there's a main custom which when the dad or the father and the kids get home from shul, that they would say kiddush right away, so that the children won't fall asleep during the whole meal, because it's like a very long meal. It's like a lot of steps. Get out, Ethan. Who's that? Get out. Get out. Then get out. That's my brother. Ethan, get out. Okay, so the kiddush is actually the first cup of wine that we would drink during the Pesach meal. There's actually 4 different cups of wine, and this is the first one. So here are some of the halachot that we have to fill, that you actually can't fill your own glass of wine. Someone else has to do it for you. And usually you should return the favor for them, and be nice, so that everyone has someone else to fill the cup for them. And the cup should hold at least 86 milliliters, which is about like a little more than 3 ounces, which is probably like 4 shots or something, if you know what that is. It's the same. So on Shabbat, usually one person can make the kiddush for the whole table. But on Pesach, each individual person has to have their own cup and say their own blessing, so that it makes it more special for that individual person. So after you finish saying kiddush, you would sit down and lean to the left, because that's what kings would do. They would lean to the left, and it would be like royalty, so you could be like more royal or more holy. Also, you would have like a cushion behind your back, so you would feel more loyal. Okay, so then we're going to the whole reason why we say kiddush as a whole. So we're saying kiddush is to sanctify the whole meal, to make the whole meal like to make it very whole, and to make it like very holy. We are realizing that Hashem is the creator of all things, and we say when we say kiddush, to make it like holy, we are Kadesh is supposed to make the world, like it's supposed to make the world, it's supposed to surpass the mundane world. It's supposed to make sure when you leave, like you're supposed to leave all the material worries in the world, so you could sanctify them. And when you come, and then you go to like your spiritual freedom and enter higher purpose, and then you go to Karpas after. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Yes. So right before we move ourselves into Karpas, right after Kiddush, as Jason mentioned, that Kiddush is the first of 4 cups of wine, the famous 4 cups of wine. What do these 4 cups represent? With our final topic for tonight, I would like to ask Mr. Aviv Michael to share.
Yeah, good evening. So basically my topic is 4 cups of wine. So the 4 cups of wine, they stand for, could you hear me? Yeah? Okay, so the 4 cups of wine, they stand for the 4 expressions that God used when he took us out of Egypt. The one of like 4 cups, and there's 4 expressions saying ve'oteti, which means like I removed you from Egypt. Ve'oteti ve'tarti, and I saved you. Ve'ga'alti, like I redeemed you. Ve'lakachti, which means like I removed you from Egypt. So what this is basically saying is that Pesach is it's talking about when we leave slavery and become free. We become free people. So the 4 cups of wine are drank at specifically different points throughout the meal. One time is as Jason said, in Kadesh, during Kiddush. The next is during Magid, which is like, it's telling us a story about the Exodus of Egypt. Then the 3rd cup of wine is drank during Birkat HaMazon, and the last one is drank during Halel. So and then also, once you when you drink this, as I was saying earlier, it's like we're leaving slavery and we're becoming free. So basically that also means that we have to act as kings, and we have to, when we drink the wine, we have to lean to the left to show our royalty. So that also comes with becoming free people. So also adding on to this, I have to say that there are many people that may not know that Pesach is like part of the Shalosh Regalim, which is the 3 high holidays, which consist of Sukkot, Pesach obviously, and Shavuot. So it's not just like a regular holiday. Obviously, it's something extra if it's part of the Shalosh Regalim, but just how much holier is it? So what we could take from this, in my opinion, is that yeah, it's a holier holiday, and we could see it like through the 4 cups of wine. Because listen, basically, usually in Judaism, when you do something, it has to be through an odd sequence of numbers. Like, let's say you're gonna count something or group something together, you should do it in like a sequence of like 1, 3, 5, 7. That's what they say. You should do it in like an odd sequence. But the 4 cups of wine, 4 is like, it's an even number. So how does that make sense? So the answer is that Pesach is so holy that each cup of wine acts as like, it has its own mitzvah. So instead of getting added like instead of the 4 cups adding on top of each other to equal 4, it's just 4 separate individual cups that like you drink it as if it's the first time for all 4 cups. So that's how holy it is. I'm done.
Thank you, Aviv. And something to add as well, it doesn't necessarily need to be wine, although it's ideal to use wine, specifically red wine, because we know that wine brings happiness out of a person. It's definitely a happy time. However, you are able to use grape juice as well. I want to thank our mentors tonight who presented. Again, the topics we talked about tonight are, we talked about chametz, how to clean your house for kashrus, how to prepare your house. Bedikas chametz, the searching of the chametz that's going to happen on Tuesday night, April 7th. Bir chametz, which is the burning of the chametz, which happens on April 8th in the morning. Zaman Cherusenu, the mindset, the philosophy behind the understanding of the auspicious time of Pesach itself. The fact that we say Hallel by davening at night, the only time we say Hallel at night. Then when we get home, we have the entire Seder, the structure of the Seder. The preparation and the order of the Seder plate and the matzot. Then we started with Kaddish, which is making Kiddush, and discussed the 4 cups of wine. Next Sunday at 8 o'clock, we are going to pick up where we left off to talking about the washing of the hands and go through each step of the Seder and the intricacies of it. The idea of this is really to prepare everyone and make sure that you have the best, most meaningful Pesach possible. And the way to do that is to be the most prepared as you possibly can be. So I encourage everyone very, very much to write down and document your questions that you have on any of the topics we covered tonight, and we will make sure that we get the information out towards you. The preparation beforehand, if you have any questions in terms of what you need to do in your house to prepare it, to make it, to be able to do bedikas chametz properly, to be able to do bir chametz properly, to be able to set up your Seder table and your plate and do the tefillah properly, please direct your questions to myself or anybody who presented tonight, and we will definitely do our best to get you prepared for Pesach. We will pick it up next week, Sunday night, with Orchatz. Next week at 8 o'clock, same time, to make sure that you are all prepared when Pesach comes in. Thank you guys so much. Have an amazing night.